Do you like roller coasters? There's that slow climb to the top, that clankety-clank of the safety catch, and then you reach the top, and you either love it or you hate it. Surely Joseph must have felt like he was on one. It was one rush after another. He finds out his betrothed wife is pregnant, gets a visit from an angel, finds out it's God's son, not some guy's, and has to pack it up and get to Bethlehem. And then he can't find a decent place for Jesus to be born. He didn't even get a chance to make him a cradle. And then shepherds show up, wanting to see the baby. What a ride! What could happen next? When you unpack that nativity scene and you set it out for Christmas, there's always those three guys with camels and gifts. You might get the impression that the wise men came in right after the shepherds carrying their gold and frankincense and myrrh. But it would actually be some time before they showed up at Joseph's front door.
The Magi are actually very well known in antiquity, not the three or more of the traditional Christmas account, but rather as a caste of priests, astrologers, astronomers, ancient professors with students. They were very well known in Mesopotamia and in Persia as well. And so they would have been naturally attuned to look at the night sky in those days because there were no distracting city lights, artificial illumination to ruin the beautiful night sky, and very little pollution as well. If we knew exactly what the Star of Bethlehem was, then we would have a way of dating the nativity, because astronomers can, of course, wind the clock back and figure out exact day and hour even as to when something occurs, like the beginning of an eclipse of the sun or moon. But we don't know actually what that astral phenomenon was in connection with the nativity. There are two basic classifications for answers. One is it's a supernatural sign sent by God. It starts and it stops, and therefore don't try to explain it by any natural means. But there's the other alternative that says, well, wait a minute, don't tie God's hands here. He could have used a natural phenomenon that was taking place to announce the message to the Magi. And indeed, the best natural explanation for the Star of Bethlehem was given by a Lutheran astronomer in the court of the King of Prague, Czechoslovakia, or the Czech Republic today. His name is, of course, the famous Johannes Kepler, the one who popularized Copernicus's idea of the sun at the center of the solar system. He pointed out that there was a remarkable astral phenomenon that took place so rarely every 800 years. Jupiter almost impinges on Saturn visually every 8 centuries. It happened at the Christmas account between 7, 6, and 5 BC. It happened 800 years later, happened in 1600 when Kepler saw it, and it will not come again till 2400 AD, so don't try to wait around for it. But this would really be spectacular. Two of the brightest stars you'd see in the sky are not stars at all, they're the planets. Jupiter, Saturn, or Venus. Sometimes Mars gets pretty bright. Now imagine them coming together like snake eyes. That would really blow the mind of any observer in antiquity or today. Now the astrological lore behind those two planets, and let me immediately say that I don't believe in astrology. I hope your viewers don't believe in astrology, but don't forget the Magi did, and God will use anything He wants to try to get His message across. Well, Jupiter is the largest planet in the sky, therefore it is the king or the ruling planet. Saturn, the ring planet, is the shield or defender of Palestine, also according to ancient astrology. So Jupiter is approaching Saturn. Translate, a king is coming to Palestine. That may have been the reason for the Magi taking the trip.
Joseph didn't know they were on their way. He was probably busy thinking of two important upcoming events, things a dad had to do for his Jewish son. According to Jewish law, every boy had to be circumcised when he was 8 days old. So when the day came, Joseph called on the nearest rabbi, and he arranged for Mary's son to be circumcised and to formally receive his name. Since it was customary for the father to ask the rabbi to let him help officiate, I'm sure Joseph offered his services. It's okay, Rabbi. I'm a carpenter. I'll take it from here. Well, whatever role Joseph might have played in the circumcision, Luke tells us, at the end of 8 days, when he was circumcised, he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. Through this first shedding of Jesus' blood, Joseph saw to it that our Savior came under God's law in our place. Jesus was substituting his perfect life of obedience for our life of rebellion and sin. Joseph's next responsibility came when Jesus was 40 days old. According to Jewish law, 40 days after a boy was born, the mother needed to bring a sacrifice to be purified from childbirth. Joseph couldn't afford the prescribed year-old lamb. He probably hadn't gotten his business off the ground yet in Bethlehem, so he brought the minimum requirement of God's law, a pair of turtle doves or pigeons. Joseph brought Mary's sacrifice, but that wasn't all.
Already in the Old Testament at Sinai, you find God commanding his people that the firstborn son must be given to God for religious purposes unless he is redeemed back by his parents. And so this was a well-known custom, and therefore he had to be bought back from God, as it were. So that's why they would present Jesus on day 40 after birth to the temple in Jerusalem.
So once again, Joseph did everything the law required. That's when a man named Simeon walked up to them and took Jesus into his arms, and he said, "Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace according to your word. For mine eyes have seen your salvation that you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light for revelation to the Gentiles and for glory to your people Israel." Gradually, Joseph and Mary were learning more and more about the mission of this special child that God had entrusted to them. Simeon taught them that Jesus would be king and savior, not just of the Jews, but of all people. Then Simeon turned away from Joseph and said something to Mary. Joseph must have strained to hear him over the noise in the temple courts. Simeon was predicting the events of a day 30-some years in the future. "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is opposed. And a sword will pierce through your own soul also, so that the thoughts from many hearts may be revealed." Joseph heard what Simeon said, but he would not live to see this prophecy fulfilled. Only Mary would be left to stand by the cross and watch Jesus die for the sins of the world. After they left the temple courts in Jerusalem and returned to Bethlehem, things started to settle down for Joseph and Mary and the young child Jesus. Joseph most likely continued in his carpentry work in Bethlehem, providing for Mary and the Christ child. Then one day, totally out of the blue, Joseph hears a hurried knock at their door. He opens it to find mysterious foreigners standing excitedly before him. They're obviously wealthy and important. These very important-looking men eagerly find Mary and Jesus, and they bow down in worship before the child. Then they open their treasures, and they present him rare gifts, gifts of gold, incense, and myrrh.
When the Magi bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the immediate assumption, of course, is that one gift per giver, therefore there had to be three. In reality, we don't know how many Magi there were. All we know is there were two or more. But the gifts they bring are very interesting. Gold, I need not tell you, is always welcome, always serviceable. These were the American Express traveler's checks that the Holy Family would use on the flight to Egypt, obviously. Frankincense is a very valuable aromatic spice used in incense, and it's interesting that myrrh, the third one, is also an embalming, a beautiful medicinal balm, that Jesus had it also applied to him at his burial. They took myrrh, you recall. How interesting, coming full circle, you might say, to the beginning of Jesus' life and also the end of his life before the resurrection, embalmed with myrrh.
What a roller coaster ride that first Christmas must have been for Joseph. Every new surprise was more amazing and glorious than the last. What could possibly come next? Unknown to Joseph and Mary, unknown even to these wise men, these visitors from the east had set events into motion, events that would lead to the death of innocent children. That very night, Joseph had another dream. More like a nightmare this time. An angel of the Lord warned him, "Rise, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Can you imagine what it was like for Mary? Joseph jumps out of bed, trembling and covered with sweat. "We've got to get out of here, now!" He grabs their few belongings, throwing them into bags with shaking hands. Mary must have been very confused. Joseph, what are you doing?" "Shh, you'll wake the baby." Joseph had to tell her, "Mary, Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him."
Herod the Great, of course, as a young ruler, really had every reason to be called Herod the Great. But later on, he's now near the end of his life. He's very ill. He has a whole medical encyclopedia worth of diseases. He's crotchety. He's paranoid, suspicious of everyone. And so when the Magi come, by the way, and say, "Where is the newborn king of the Jews?" it shows the Magi had not passed Psychology 100, because it was the wrong question to ask a dying king who was suspicious of everyone and everything. The picture we get in Flavius Josephus, my favorite source of information from the first century Judaism, is, in fact, we get 2 whole books worth of information on Herod the Great. And the image we see in Josephus is exactly the same as the cameo appearance of Herod in Matthew chapter 2. It's the same FBI fingerprint. It is exactly one of the confirmations, I think, of the accuracy of the biblical record.
Joseph was the man. He didn't hesitate. He didn't second guess. He got the job done. Matthew tells us, "And he rose, and he took the child and his mother by night, and departed to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod." It was quite a trip, twice as long as their journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem. And of course, this time they didn't dare stop at the rest areas along the way.
They most probably would have taken the road south from Bethlehem, southwest to Hebron, and then taken the road straight west to Gaza today, where they would have joined some traffic going between Mesopotamia and Egypt along the Via Maris, the way of the sea, and crossed the Nile Delta, probably to Alexandria, Egypt, because there were more Jews living in Alexandria than even Jerusalem in those days, and here they would have had other family members, relatives from the house of David that would have certainly put them up.
To me, this was Joseph's shining hour. Taking the angel at his word, he saved our Savior from Herod's cruel paranoia. That's why Joseph is my hero, a carpenter of steel.